From the outside, we looked like the dream couple. People said we were inseparable, relationship goals. The kind of pair that would walk into a room and instantly draw admiration. My friends used to joke that we were destined for a fairy tale ending, and for a long time, I believed it too. His name was Ethan. Tall, charming, and quick with words that made strangers feel at ease. He had a way of making the world think he was perfect. And in those early days, he made me feel like I was the luckiest woman alive. Dinners under city lights, weekend getaways, inside jokes that felt like our own language. It was easy to believe I had found forever. But perfection has a way of cracking when you stare too closely. At first, I brushed off the little things. His sighs when I ordered dessert. The way he rolled his eyes if I disagreed with him in front of others. The subtle digs he passed off as just kidding. They were small, easy enough to excuse. And I told myself every couple had their flaws. Except the flaws grew sharper. When I talked about my career goals, he'd smirk and say, "Don't aim too high. You'll just stress yourself out." If I dressed up for work, he'd mutter, "Who are you trying to impress?" And when I dreamed aloud about traveling, he'd remind me of the bills waiting to be paid, as though ambition and responsibility couldn't exist in the same breath. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. A calculated softness, a backhanded compliment, a smile that looked loving but carried judgment underneath. Slowly, I realized the man who had once lifted me up was now keeping me tethered, making sure my wings never stretched too far. But I stayed. I stayed because I thought love was supposed to be patient, forgiving. I stayed because I convinced myself he'd change. And I stayed because leaving felt like failing, as though ending the relationship would mean admitting that I had been wrong about him, about us. The breaking point came on a night I'll never forget. We had argued again, this time about my standards. I told him I wanted more respect, more support, more love than constant criticism disguised as honesty. His face hardened, his voice turned cruel. He leaned in, eyes sharp and voice dripping with contempt, and said words that lodged themselves deep into my chest like shards of glass. "You'll never find better than me." I froze. He meant it, every syllable. He believed he was the ceiling, the best I could ever hope for, and that the world beyond him held nothing for me. That night, lying awake in a bed that suddenly felt colder than ever, I realized something terrifying. Maybe he was right. Maybe walking away meant stepping into emptiness. But a quiet voice in me whispered back, or maybe walking away is the only way to find out. And that whisper was the beginning of everything. Leaving wasn't simple. It never is. You don't just walk away from years of shared memories, routines, and the comfort of what you thought was love. It's like trying to rip out roots that have wrapped themselves around your heart. Painful, messy, necessary. The morning after Ethan told me I'd never find better, I stared at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red from crying, my face pale, and yet there was a flicker of something new in my reflection, resolve. His words had stung, but they also peeled away the illusion I'd been clinging to. If he truly believed he was the best I could ever have, then I needed to prove him wrong. Not to him, but to myself. When I finally told him it was over, his reaction wasn't sorrow. It was smugness. He smirked, as if I had just proven his point. "You'll be back," he said casually, sliding his hands into his pockets. "You think you can do better, but you'll see. Guys out there won't put up with you being so picky." Picky. That word sliced through me. Wanting respect, kindness, and encouragement was now picky? Wanting to feel loved without conditions was asking too much? His dismissal burned, but I bit my tongue and walked out the door. The days that followed were harder than I imagined. Friends whispered their doubts, asking if I was sure I wasn't overreacting. My mother, though supportive, hinted gently that no one's perfect, and that maybe I should have tried harder. And Ethan? He made sure I heard through mutual acquaintances that he was moving on just fine. Each comment felt like salt pressed into an open wound. There were nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. His voice echoed in my head like a cruel mantra. "You'll never find better. You'll never find better." But as weeks turned into months, something shifted. I started noticing how light the air felt without his criticism pressing down on me. I went out with friends and laughed without fear of being judged for it. I bought myself flowers just because I could. I enrolled in a cooking class Ethan had once mocked, and for the first time in years, I tasted joy in the smallest victories. And yet, even as I grew stronger, his words lingered like a shadow. Every time I looked in the mirror, I wondered if maybe he was still right. What if this was all there was? One evening, as I sipped coffee at a little cafe downtown, I caught myself staring at the couples around me. Some smiling, some arguing, some lost in their phones. And I asked myself a question I hadn't dared to before. What if better isn't about finding someone else at all? What if it's about finding myself again? I didn't know then that better was already walking toward me, about to collide with my life in a way I never could have predicted. It happened on a Tuesday evening, the kind of night that didn't feel like it would matter. I had almost skipped the networking event my colleague dragged me to, convinced it would be another crowded room full of handshakes, name tags, and forgettable conversations. I wasn't looking for anything, especially not romance. My heart still carried bruises from Ethan's words. The hotel ballroom buzzed with chatter, clinking glasses, and the faint hum of jazz music. I stood near the back, holding a glass of wine, planning my exit strategy. That's when I felt someone step beside me. "Not a fan of these things either?" a deep voice asked. I turned, and for a moment I forgot how to speak. He was tall, well-dressed, with a quiet confidence that didn't scream for attention but commanded it anyway. His smile was warm, but not in the rehearsed, too-perfect way Ethan's had been. This was different. Effortless. I laughed softly. "Is it that obvious?" He grinned. "Let's just say you look like you're counting down the minutes until you can sneak out." Something about his ease made me relax. We talked, first about the event, then about work, then about life. His name was Daniel. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers, leaning in, his attention steady and unhurried. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen. And then, as the conversation flowed, a detail slipped in that made my stomach twist. Daniel mentioned the company he worked for, the very same company Ethan worked at. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, until he introduced himself fully. Daniel Carter, Ethan's boss. My chest tightened. Of all the men in the city, fate had placed me in front of him. I wanted to pull away, to excuse myself, to avoid the tangle of complications that instantly surfaced. But Daniel wasn't Ethan. His presence didn't feel like a trap, it felt like possibility. Still, guilt tugged at me. Was I betraying some unspoken code by even enjoying this conversation? The old version of me, Ethan's version, would have believed so. But the woman who had started rebuilding herself wasn't so sure. As the evening wound down, Daniel glanced at me with a spark in his eyes. "Listen," he said, sliding his hand into his pocket. "This might be forward, but I'd love to continue this conversation somewhere less fluorescent." He gestured at the harsh ballroom lights with a playful smirk. "Dinner, maybe?" My breath caught. The air seemed charged, as though the universe was daring me to take a step I hadn't planned for. I could already imagine Ethan's voice if he found out. The mockery. The rage. The "I told you so's." But staring into Daniel's steady gaze, I felt a new question rising inside me. What if this wasn't a mistake? What if this was the beginning of better? And then Daniel asked, softly but firmly, "So, what do you say?" I almost said no. Old habits die hard, and Ethan's voice still lingered in my mind, telling me I was asking for too much, wanting more than I deserved. But something about Daniel's steady eyes, the way he didn't pressure but simply invited, gave me courage. "Yes," I heard myself say. "Dinner sounds nice." And it was more than nice. It was easy. Effortless in a way that startled me. Daniel wasn't trying to impress me with grand gestures or flashy stories. He was curious. Present. When I talked about my love for cooking, he didn't laugh the way Ethan used to. He asked me what my favorite dish was. When I admitted I'd always dreamed of traveling through Europe, he didn't roll his eyes at the expense. He asked me which city I'd want to see first. I didn't realize how much I had been starved of simple respect until I tasted it again. Weeks turned into months. Dinners became weekends together. Phone calls stretched late into the night, filled not with arguments or jabs but with laughter and plans. With Daniel, I felt light. Not the fragile, temporary high I used to cling to with Ethan, but something steady, safe. For the first time in years, I stopped doubting myself. My laugh came more easily. My ambitions felt valid. Daniel encouraged me, celebrated me, even when I stumbled. And somewhere along the way, I realized, this wasn't just better. This was what love was supposed to feel like. Of course, fate wasn't going to let me enjoy it quietly. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel and I went out to a small farmer's market downtown. The sun was warm, music drifted through the stalls, and I was holding his hand when it happened. Ethan. He was across the way, standing with a group of co-workers, laughter on his lips, until his eyes landed on me. And then on Daniel. For a split second, time froze. I saw his expression flicker from confusion, to recognition, to disbelief. His jaw tightened, his smile vanished. The smug confidence he always wore cracked, just slightly like glass under strain. I felt Daniel's hand squeeze mine, grounding me. He hadn't noticed Ethan yet, but I had. My heart hammered in my chest, torn between dread and exhilaration. Because in that instant, I realized what Ethan was seeing. The proof that I hadn't crawled back. That I had found someone better, his boss no less. Ethan's stare burned into me across the crowd. He didn't approach, not yet. But his clenched fists and narrowed eyes told me enough. This wasn't over. And I had the sinking feeling that the past I thought I'd buried was about to claw its way back into my life. I should have known Ethan wouldn't let it go. He never could. Control was his favorite weapon, and the sight of me with Daniel had ripped it right out of his hands. The first sign came a few days later. A message from an unknown number. So this is what better looks like? I didn't reply. I deleted it and told myself silence was the sharpest answer. But silence only seemed to provoke him more. Then came the whispers. A mutual friend mentioned Ethan had been asking about me, slipping my name into conversations at gatherings. He doesn't sound happy, she said carefully, as if warning me. Be careful. I laughed it off, pretending it didn't bother me. But deep down, my stomach churned. Ethan wasn't the type to stew quietly. And sure enough, one evening as I was leaving work, I found him leaning against my car in the parking lot, like a shadow I couldn't shake. Long time no see, he said smoothly, though his eyes betrayed the tension coiled inside him. I froze. Ethan, what are you doing here? He shrugged, too casual. Just wanted to talk. Catch up. It's funny, running into you the other day with him. His lip curled around the word like it tasted bitter. Didn't expect you to move on so fast. My pulse raced, but I steadied my voice. You told me I'd never find better. Turns out you were wrong. His smirk vanished. For a flicker of a second, I saw the mask fall away. The anger, the disbelief, the sting of wounded pride. Then he leaned closer, his voice low and sharp. You think this is gonna last? You think he's really different? He's a man, same as me. Sooner or later, he'll get tired of you. You'll see. I took a step back, refusing to let him see me flinch. That's your fear, Ethan. Not mine. Before he could say more, I slid into my car and drove off, my hands trembling on the wheel. His voice still rang in my ears, venom wrapped in false certainty. I didn't tell Daniel. Not yet. Part of me didn't want to drag the past into what we were building. Another part didn't want to admit that Ethan still had the power to shake me. But Ethan wasn't done. He started small, liking old photos on my social media, sending vague late-night texts that I ignored. And then he escalated. An email to my office, questioning my professionalism. A rumor slipped into circles he knew would get back to me. It was his way of clawing at control, of reminding me he was still there, lurking. And through it all, I kept one truth close. I wasn't going back. Not now, not ever. But I also knew something Ethan didn't. Something I hadn't told anyone yet. Because Daniel had been planning something quietly, carefully, with a look in his eyes that made my heart race in the best way. And soon, Ethan was going to find out in the most unforgettable way possible. Daniel had a way of making the ordinary extraordinary. A Tuesday night dinner could feel like a celebration. A quiet walk through the park felt like an adventure. But nothing could have prepared me for the moment he asked me to marry him. It was a crisp autumn evening, the kind where the air carries a chill, but the city lights feel warm. He told me he had a surprise and led me to the rooftop of a hotel downtown. Strings of lights twinkled overhead, and in the distance, the skyline glittered like a painting. I thought it was just one of his thoughtful gestures, until he dropped to one knee. My breath caught. The world seemed to stop as Daniel looked up at me, his eyes steady, his voice strong but tender. You've taught me what love really means. You've shown me that strength and kindness can live in the same heart. I don't just want to love you. I want to build a life with you. Will you marry me? Tears blurred my vision. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. All the scars, all the doubts Ethan had left me with, melted in that moment. Yes, I whispered, then louder. Yes. He slipped the ring onto my finger, and when he stood, I threw my arms around him. The city roared beneath us, but all I heard was the sound of possibility, of a future that was mine to claim. But as joy consumed me, a thought lingered at the edge of my mind. Ethan. He had spent months trying to convince me I'd never find better. He had thrown words like knives, hoping they'd pierce deep enough to keep me from moving forward. And now, here I was, standing beside the man he answered to every day at work, wearing his boss's ring. The irony was almost poetic. I didn't want to stoop to Ethan's level. I didn't want to play games or seek revenge. But the truth was, I didn't need words to prove him wrong. One single image could do all the talking. That night, as Daniel and I celebrated privately, laughter spilling over glasses of champagne, I snapped a photo of my hand resting gently on his chest. The diamond sparkled against the fabric of his suit. His arm curled protectively around me. No caption. No explanation. Just the photo. I saved it, waiting for the right moment. Because deep down, I knew silence would be louder than anything I could say. And when Ethan saw it, he would finally realize what I had known for a long time now. I hadn't just found better. I had found everything he told me I couldn't have. The moment came sooner than I expected. A week after the proposal, Ethan tried one last time to rattle me. He cornered me outside a cafe, his tone dripping with the same smugness I once mistook for confidence. "Still playing house with Daniel?" he sneered. "Trust me, it won't last. Men like him don't stick around for women like you." The old me would have flinched, would have swallowed the insult and let it burn in silence. But this time I just smiled, because tucked safely in my phone was the one thing that would silence him forever. That night, after Daniel and I toasted with friends, I finally did it. I opened Ethan's number, attached the engagement photo, the ring gleaming on my finger, Daniel's arm strong around me, and pressed send. No words. No explanation. Just the truth captured in one perfect frame. For a few minutes, nothing. Then the read receipt appeared. My stomach fluttered, not with fear, but with anticipation. And then nothing again. No reply. No rant. No attempt to claw back control. Just silence. But in that silence, I imagined the storm inside him. The disbelief, the anger, the realization that his never had been shattered with one diamond ring and one photograph. Daniel never knew the message I'd sent. I didn't need to tell him. Because this wasn't about Ethan anymore. It wasn't about revenge or proving a point. It was about me, finally choosing a life where I didn't have to fight for scraps of love, where respect and joy weren't luxuries, but givens. Still, I won't lie, sending that photo was satisfying. It was the full circle moment I hadn't known I needed. Not to wound him, but to close the chapter he thought he owned. The next morning, I deleted Ethan's number for good. His silence was answer enough. And as I stood in the kitchen with Daniel, sunlight streaming in, his hand warm over mine, I realized the most powerful part of it all. Ethan had been wrong. I had found better. Better love. Better peace. A better version of myself. The photo said it all, but the life I was about to build would say even more. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't anger, or words, or even justice. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is happiness, so bright, it leaves your past in the shadows. And that's exactly where Ethan would stay. Forever. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Thank you.